meeting to order. Recording in progress. Welcome everyone to the June 1st, 2022 meeting of the Planning Board. We have no hearings tonight. Tonight we have a menu of just administrative matters to deal with. Let me start by having a roll call to see who's here. Clark
Brewer here.
Amy Glassman here.
I come before you in the alphabet.
Sorry.
Tom Callahan is here. Next, Amy is here. Okay, Kevin
Hine is here.
Deirdre Hobson is here.
Great. And this is Lauren, and I see that Angela. Is Angela with us tonight? No, she's not.
No, she's not able to join us tonight, but she will do the minutes from the recording and my notes.
Okay, good. All right, so the first item on our agenda is to talk about the master plan and its way forward in light of resignation of Katie Dugan and Woody Chittick. I've invited Katie to be here today. You all by now have seen her letter of May 23, 2022. She read it at the select board meeting last week. You don't have to read it here, Katie, but wanted to discuss it because our board was named as well as subject to some critique. And I want to discuss Katie's points about the workings of this board, and then just generally discuss this board's position on the master plan going forward. I will tell you that in preparation for the select board's goals and objectives meeting, which is on Monday, I would like to wrap up this discussion with a reaffirmation by this board of its support of the master plan generally. That does not require everyone to agree on every point about it, but that's what I'd like to see. But anyway, without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Katie. Maybe just go into the background of this letter and what your feelings about what's going on with the master plan in your perspective.
Sure, thank you. And again, I appreciate the time to come and talk to you. It feels like after close to 5 years working on the master plan, first as a school committee liaison to the master plan, I worked on the plan itself with Clark Brewer and with Amy Glassmeyer and a number of other members from the community to pull together what I thought was a really well thought through and well participated by the community plan for how Cohasset could chart its future on a number of different areas. And at the same time, the town was doing quite a bit of work, as we all know, on a similar planning effort related to the harbor. Open Space was completing their open space and rec plan. So when we ended 2019, we had 3 major plans that were or could be pillars for Cohasset in terms of moving forward as to how we wanted to vision our community. So we sort of ended that last decade, I think, on a very strong footing in terms of a vision. And then this decade, we were tasked with beginning the implementation. So starting in actually early 2020, the Master Plan Implementation Committee was pulled together, and I was asked to serve as a citizen at large, which I did because I truly believed in the plan. I truly believed in what I thought was a shared vision by the community for all of the planning efforts that have taken place over the 2 years previous. So I've worked for 2 years in the Master Plan Implementation Committee with a variety of members from different liaison boards, including 2 other citizens at large, Cassie Malatesta and Jennifer Boylan. And we've come before the planning board on multiple occasions. We've come before the select board, and our first task was to pull together a set of priorities in terms of implementation, and we did that. And we made a recommendation around 5 critical implementation priorities, being Elm Street, zoning bylaws, affordable housing, economic development, and sewer planning. And that was our year 1 recommendations that were voted on and supported unanimously by the select board and by the planning board. And we began implementation on those by using a working group structure to try and jumpstart some of the efforts and get additional hours of volunteer effort put behind each of those initiatives. And we made progress. Elm Street Corridor in particular did an amazing job in terms of trying to pull together a plan along with several rounds of community input. Similar work was done by the zoning bylaw working group. Affordable housing has largely continued on through the two committees that actually have the chartered ownership of that, the trust and the steering committee. And the economic task force did a lot of work in year one that resulted in a series of recommendations, which now sits on the shelf, frankly, but it's been retitled Village Revitalization because we haven't found the bandwidth either from a committee structure perspective or from a town hall perspective to begin to move forward on recommendations there. And then last but not least was sewer planning, which when we began the implementation effort was supposed to be a joint implementation effort between the sewer commission and the select board. So we had started off with clear support from both boards. I think unfortunately, those shared vision and those shared values have fractured. And I honestly have thought a lot about this, and I don't fully understand why we fractured. But as an example, and I'll share with this one because frankly, the planning board has a role in it, was the Elm Street Corridor. This is an effort that got all the way to the 90-yard line and then stalled. And when the master plan implementation committee came before the planning board and asked for a letter of support for this initiative, which members of the planning board were involved with and was sort of critical to the master plan and the harbor plan, we couldn't come together in writing a letter of support to the select board to try and push this forward. So that was just an example to me as to how somehow over 2 years, the shared vision has sort of dissipated. And unfortunately, without, in many cases, unanimous, and I know this is a controversial statement, but I'll be totally honest, without unanimous support of the planning board and the select board, these initiatives will not get done. There will be other priorities that come up that supersede it. There will be minority voices that that attempt to sort of derail the conversation that I think the community has had in structuring these plans. And so where I got to was that I honestly could not see a path forward without more vocal and frankly unanimous support from the two boards that had statutory responsibility, the select board from a financial and from a vision perspective, but then also the planning board as the statutory owner of the master plan itself. And without that kind of active voice and shared vision, there was no point in trying to push forward the implementation effort. So my letter concluded with saying that I was taking a time out. I still strongly believe in all of the year one and year two priorities laid out. I frankly don't see that there's the political support to move forward on them. And in some cases, the resources, both from a financial and from a planning perspective to move these forward. And unless we change that, the dynamic was going to be spinning plates instead of actual implementation. And part of the reason I joined the master plan implementation committee was to try and bring this vision to fruition. And it just became more obvious that that was not going to happen in the current state. So that's where I stand. To me, it is that shared vision that somehow has to happen again. And I feel like we've lost the momentum. We had momentum coming out of all the planning efforts at the end of 2019, and somehow we've lost that. And I don't know how to get that back on track. Because I see fractured votes everywhere I look. I don't see unanimous support for Elm Street. I don't see unanimous support for zoning bylaws. I don't see unanimous support for sewer, regional sewer. It just sort of goes on and on. I see split votes, and I see that fracturing further as we try and push it through the implementation cycle. So I'll pause there, and I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to let you guys opine. But again, it was with regret, but I also have frankly too much respect for myself to continue to put myself out there in a way that I didn't think was going to be successful in the community or welcomed by the community.
All right, well, thank you, Katie. And I appreciate the difficulty you had in writing this letter and coming to speak about it. But, you know, I wanted to make sure that this board addressed it forthrightly. I don't think we could ignore it. It wasn't discussed in detail with the select board last week. I'm not saying they might not in the future, but can I ask maybe generally what exactly you think this board can do at this stage? Because, you know, every one of us here at one time or another has professed support for the master plan. And you're right, it's under our jurisdictional purview. It's, you know, we should be supporting something that we're in charge of, but is there anything specific you might want to see us do at this point?
Well, I think unfortunately we're sort of back to, I feel like we've gone through sort of chutes and ladders, and in some ways we're back at the beginning. And so it starts with identifying which of the, we now have 10 implementation priorities that we've laid out, the year 1 and the year 2. And I think we're back to looking at those 10 and asking the planning board, of those 10, if you had to choose, you know, 2 or 3 to push forward, what would be your slate of projects? Because I honestly, I don't see us being able to, just due to lack of institutional muscle memory when it comes to implementation, being able to handle much more than that right now. But I do think it's as simple as starting with, like, out of the 10 that were identified as critical implementation priorities, what does the planning board support? What would you come behind? And then it's a matter of bringing that to the select board and trying to create energy around implementation again. We're back to the basics of, like, what's our shared vision? I thought we had a shared vision, but I'm not so sure anymore. And so I think we're back to, if it's not these 10, then what else? But I truly believe the ones that were identified have value, and shouldn't be discarded wholesale. But I do think it's as simple as, what does the planning board choose to support as the implementation priorities that we're going to address?
Okay, thank you. We'll get to that in a minute. I did see that Colin Miller is an attendee. He says he's a member of the Elm Street Working Group. Can we promote him? He wanted to give us a quick update.
Who is it?
That Colin.
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt. He's not a member of the working group. He reached out asking about the working group.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's just a resident.
Oh, all right. All right. All right. Well, we got you on there, Colin. Is there anything in particular you'd like to offer to this discussion?
Not specifically. I assume you can all hear me.
Yes.
Excellent. Nothing beyond the question. And I, as a citizen, I appreciate the efforts of everybody on this call and on the committee. I understand that these sorts of jobs require long hours from everybody. So thank you. But yeah, generally was just interested to understand where all the Elm Street project stood, and then just also express both my support and my wife's support for the Elm Street Corridor and also the master plan in totality.
Okay.
That was all.
All right. Thank you. And my apologies to our group that I misread his question, but that's fine. All right. Let me throw this out to members for individual thoughts, comments. I certainly have a number of thoughts and comments about this subject, but if I recall where I left off in the alphabetical rotation last week, Amy, you're up first.
All right. right, thank you.
And I really, I just
say
focused on,
only
Katie.
a couple of things. One is in the field of planning, you cannot get a majority vote, or you cannot get a unanimous vote. But that's not surprising because individuals have very different points of view. But if you can get a majority vote, often that's the vote that takes projects forward. And I will say, from my understanding of both of the Elm Street Corridor challenges, as well as the challenges on the planning board, that it was not a unanimous vote on the part of everybody that was participating that brought it to a halt. It was individuals with individual points of view. And perhaps it is the case that in instances where you have individual points of view that seem to be paramount, that it then requires bringing some sort of mediation in so that it becomes obvious that this is actually the most important direction that the town can go. The town needs to do it for these reasons, and it shouldn't be left up to a non-elected official to have to deliver that message to a lay board. It is actually the elected members who need to be leading the charge. And I think in both cases, the elected officials on those boards basically didn't push hard enough.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, I know Kevin and Deirdre, you're both new to all of this, but I don't know if you have any thoughts you'd like to share about Katie's points and just the master plan generally and the support the board needs to give. Kevin, you're up next. So.
I'd first like to thank Ms. Dugan for her poignant letter and details provided in it, and for taking the time to put it forth in the manner in which she did to the select board, to the town at large. I know she stepped down at the moment she felt was right to do under the circumstances she thought. I just had a couple of questions with regard to the points that she just made and pointed out. And these may be contained in the letter, these may be contained in other discussions that have occurred, but I guess I would just like to flesh them out to the extent that she feels comfortable doing so right now in this venue. And there are 2 points. What do you attribute the fractured support situation to? And then the follow-up to that is, who do you attribute the fractured support situation to? And to the extent you're comfortable detailing those, let's shine light on what needs to be shined light on here. I appreciate you being here to answer questions and to provide more light on the situation to the extent that you can.
Guess there's sort of two kind of main themes, I would say. One is a natural occurrence in town, which is that compositions of boards change over time due to elections, due to turnover. And there's certainly some of the implementation priorities that we identified and we're attempting to tackle are multi-year implementation efforts. Some of what has occurred is that as boards have changed over, what you presented and what you thought you had support for 2 years ago in terms of implementation priorities, there isn't necessarily that same shared vision for the new members, or they don't feel the same attachment to the priorities. They bring with them as elected officials new priorities that they think that the community has raised or brought them or elected them to implement. And so some of it is, there doesn't seem to be a shared vision that was created through the planning documents. There seems to be a revolving, or evolving is a better word, evolving set of priorities. And that's from an implementation perspective, that's really tough to have new priorities slip in that are given more weight than the existing priorities. And we'll never get anything done if we have new priorities come in that sort of supersede, and I think
Do
some
you
of
have
it,
an example of that, a specific example of it, so that we understand it?
Yeah.
I would say, and I'll be very frank, the field study kind of comes out of left field as an example of something that potentially is going to supersede master plan priorities. And I think some of it comes down from the view of scarce resources, where we know that the town is financially constrained. And so saying yes to Elm Street Corridor and spending money there means that potentially down the road, there won't be money to be spent on fields or another priority. So there's, as you have a shifting set of, or evolving set of priorities and a limited set of resources, that's where the real conflicts result. So there's a hesitancy to commit to a old priority. You're fearful that one of your new priorities isn't going to get funding when it comes up in the queue. So that's probably one of the examples that, again, I find frustrating, that I thought we had a shared vision that we were attempting to implement, and there seems to be that evolution. I'm sorry, there was another question embedded in there, Kevin, and I forgot.
Well, it wasn't
Yeah,
just. Go
It
ahead.
was just, okay, yeah, I appreciate that. And those are very good points. And I guess I would just, it sounds like, there's a regular turnover in any organization, whether it's town government and town committees and governance in general. So it sounds like there may be a turnover of people. And it sounds like perhaps, and just correct me if I'm wrong, there might be changes in a vested interest of the people that are coming into the fold.
It's not like and I worked for years and years in corporations, and there's that turnover in terms of priorities. When turnover in people, it happens at a local municipal level in ways that you don't see in a corporate world. So you're right. It's the turnover and the vested interests associated with that turnover that disrupts your ability to implement, unless you have a shared vision around what your implementation priorities are. And I think scarce financial resources and scarce implementation resources from a town hall perspective just exacerbate that.
So the follow-up was, or the second part of the same question went beyond the who do you attribute the fractured support situation to I'm sorry, from what do you attribute it to who do you attribute it to? I mean, are there particular that can be named? I mean,
I'd be careful. Yeah, let's be careful. I don't know that we
look,
need to
there's
blame.
boards, things can be named in a broad sense.
Yeah.
Governance is broad in general. So let's just, I want to try to understand where something is broken or not happening that needs to be attended to.
Well,
So let's take Elm Street Corridor as an example. Elm Street Corridor, the planning board was not of a like mind to provide a simple letter of support. And some of it came down to feelings that a letter of support would, or Elm Street Corridor redesign would benefit a CHI as a result. And that was somehow disadvantageous to the community, that we were going to redesign a corridor and intersection that would ultimately perhaps benefit CHI by having additional open space in front of their redevelopment. That sentiment, is to me very dangerous, because it sort of it looked at the project or the proposed project from the perspective of one entity potentially benefiting versus the community benefiting from the project. And to be honest, that open space that was being created by redesigning the intersection, yes, it happened to be like GPS or geolocated in front of CHI's redevelopment, but there was a reason for doing that in terms of providing contiguous open space instead of splitting it up over an intersection and providing incremental benefit to the community. So there's sentiments like that that I think are dangerous when we began to look at individual concerns over the community's benefit. And that's where the calculus for me began to really break down. And that continued again at the select board, where there are conversations about whether if we fund Elm Street, what other projects are not going to get funded down the queue that in some individuals' minds have a bigger benefit to the community or have a bigger benefit to them from their individual viewpoints. So again, it comes back to this calculus around the master plan is supposed to be moving forward a community vision, a shared community vision that benefits the community as a whole. But I feel like a lot of times individual or single point concerns seem to derail the process. And you know, similarly, I mean, there were some very vocal individuals that stepped forward a month after the public process was concluded and began to disrupt what was a shared vision again for the redesign of Elm Street. So for me, I find it really hard when there's not a view that it may not be perfect, but the majority view or the majority of this project is a huge step forward for the community. So I hope that answers your question, but it really, for me, it's the individual vested interests or the single point, the narrow point interests that seem to disrail the process instead of the bigger community benefit that's being embraced.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for the new members and to remind our existing members, you know, the redesign of that intersection was a part of our decision with respect to the hotel project. And it's off-site, it's not owned by the developer. We couldn't force him to do anything. They did agree in part of the decision to make a financial contribution to the redesign. But again, it's not to benefit the hotel project. It was done to soften the impact of the hotel project that I don't think the community still fully appreciates, because that whole hearing process was done by Zoom, where you couldn't really appreciate the scale. We as a community are going to benefit by the added open space along the harbor edge at the site, but it means the building is going to come much closer to the sidewalk. It'll be right on the sidewalk. It won't be set back like the old hotel was. So, you know, from the planning board's perspective, it's an integral part of our decision on a project that is going to have significant impact to the community. And I think we all need to remember that in this, you know, and not think of this as benefiting one owner. It's benefiting the community because of what is now going to be developed there. And we all need to remember that. And anyway, I won't interrupt anymore. Kevin, are you all set for the moment?
I am.
All right.
Thank you, Katie, for your time.
Deirdre, anything you'd like to offer? Mr. Miller, we're going to just keep this to the board right now, if you don't mind. I saw that you were
Sure.
looking to speak for a minute.
The dangers of promoting me to an equivalent.
Yeah, no, we'll send you back to Never Neverland.
Please do. I have to pick up my wife at the train here shortly anyway, but thank
Okay,
you for
all right.
your
No, but
time and for the question.
Thank you for participating, and stay tuned. There'll be more on this subject.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Deirdre, any thoughts here you'd like to offer, or comments?
Well,
questions?
I just echo Kevin's appreciation, Katie, of all the work you did. My husband, Peter, worked with you and Clark for many years, as well as that on affordable housing. And we talked it regularly in this house. So I understand some of your frustrations and your difficulties at this point. I appreciate all the hard work you've done. After many years of working in the state legislature as a lobbyist, I can tell you this is not an easy task you put before yourself and the board. And I would like to, as a new board member, do whatever we can to support going forward. That was a lot of work put into a master plan, both on your part, on Clark's part, and all the other members that were there. And if we can try and put our personal interests aside and focus on Cohasset as a community, I think that we can have some semblance of a shared vision. And I understand how difficult this is sometimes for a larger group of people. But I would like to be able to just, that's all I'm going to say at this point, is learn from what you are telling us to try and make some sort of plan that the planning board can move forward with.
Yeah.
So thank you, Katie.
No, I enjoyed working with Peter. It was a pleasure.
Okay. Clark?
Thanks, Tom. Katie, during the master plan, was a force. I mean, she came to the first meeting with a binder of the 2004 master plan, organized, color coded, and ready to go. And she applied the same professional level of rigor throughout the creation of the master plan. And I think that the master plan substantially was substantially completed as well as it was because of her determination, her getting a little pissed off sometimes about things, and keeping our consultant to task. Now, and Katie, and this isn't just all compliments about Katie, has applied the same level of rigor and professionalism to the implementation committee and tasks. And I think everybody as a town, everybody should be grateful for her. And I understand completely when you're a volunteer and you volunteered hundreds and thousands of hours and committed to concepts and ideas, and they don't seem to be working well. It can be disillusioning. And I think that you're smart to take a time out. I mean, I think it's okay. I think that the work and the projects and the ideas will still be there, even if they're not as fresh. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the master plan. In terms of a shared vision, oh gosh, I mean, I agree with Ms. Glassmeyer. We can't get unanimous support. And the reason is, over the last 2 years, I really believe that, as a observer of human behavior, that we have all been isolated, fragmented, and chopped up in ways that we never really imagined. I mean, we used to complain about boards and committees in the town of Cohasset being in silos. Well, now every single individual in every single committee is acting in silos. And I think it's going to take a while for us to re-knit the kind of working together into letting go of things that don't matter, and holding on to the things that really matter and that are really important. And even if they don't take place in the timeline that we hope. I think if I now, okay, I've been mostly complimentary, so I'm going to turn to a constructive criticism on the implementation committee, and that is, instead of going for the low-hanging fruit, I think that you went for the most important and the most difficult things. And and on the one hand, you should be complimented on that. On the other hand, perhaps perhaps that's a part of the problem. I mean, I think that we always had, as a part of the implementation approach, to go after the low hanging fruit so we could have some successes, and then bite off a few of the bigger, uglier, gnarlier, complex, passion and dissent evoking things. I mean, I was on the Elm Street Corridor, and if I remember correctly, I think I was asking, well, when do we write our letter? When do we write our letter? And we had one member of this board that's like, oh, this is just going to benefit the developer. What's the big deal? Don't we have other sidewalks to do? We explained to this member after our discussion about Elm Street that, yeah, there was a corridor design study that was done a number of years ago, that we got state money to redesign 3A South, that we're working on a corridor redesign, 20% for 3A North. We have sidewalk designs that connect in along Sawyer Street. We're working on this. And he said, oh, I mean, it was like, he didn't know. He just thought this is the only important priority for the town of Cohasset. Now, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't know stuff, that you can explain it as lugubrious detail as possible, but by the time you do, he's forgotten, or he or she or has forgotten what you said in the beginning. So there's no way we're going to get unanimous agreement on things, but sometimes we just have to start at the beginning with the foundation of what we've done, and work the problems, work the issues, get as many voices as possible. I would say, having worked on 2 master plans, it's exhausting and disillusioning, and in a way, I reject that has to be like that. But I truly believe that the work that Katie's done with the master plan implementation is solid and can be dropped for some period of time and picked up again, and worked on robustly. But the problem that we have is, as board members and residents and people with friends and families, is we're in a very strange, fragmented time culturally, and it's just not just, who's right, CNN or Fox News. It's really everywhere. So, I mean, in the corporate world, you do team building, right? You'd work on team building, and I think, in a way, for our town, hiring a conflict resolution manager and doing really real team building type of activities it may be the next step for reknitting bonds and realizing who the bad actors might be and how to deal with them and still make progress, because I think we're all here because we care about our town. We're invested in positive outcomes. It's been so hard over the last 2 years for everybody. So no failure on your part, Katie. You've been working your tail off. You're organized. You do great presentations. You make a compelling argument. But I just think a lot of the maybe critical fragments have been left out because of the isolation. And that's
Thank you.
that's
I appreciate the positive thoughts. I don't disagree with you on low hanging fruit, although the honest truth is that a decade could go by before you even try and tackle some of the gnarly stuff. So you sort of have to decide, maybe it was too much, maybe it was too many big projects, but on the flip side, some of these don't get done unless you invest, half a decade plus of effort.
You're right. And there's some things that are timely that need to be focused on right now, because they're either an emergency or grant money will be lost.
And,
But
you know,
but I'll just bring up one thing is back in 2003, 2004, I put together a something called One Way Sunday, which was a concept that would cost like $2,000 in orange cones and signage. And it was to make Beach Street, Atlantic Ave, out to Forest one way on Sunday. I was like, they do it at Memorial Drive in Cambridge. And I only did it because I thought
they
it was
closed down, so they closed down Central Park on the weekends.
Right. I mean,
The biggest city in the.
it could be done. I mean, everybody was like, I got phone calls from like, I drive to Sunday, it's just church, and I hate you, Clark. Why don't you close down North Main Street? And it was a fascinating social experiment on how we as a community, different from anyone else, because I guess maybe it doesn't matter to me. But we as a community in Cohasset, how we deal with change. And because I had a guy at the same time, another architect named Jim Shipsky, he said he was working on a grant which would restore the Sandy Beach Dune, removing the parking lot and that section of Atlantic Ave. That was his idea of, and he was selling it to that then master plan committee. And I was like, God, what we really, that'll never happen. It's just, why do people come up with stuff that is completely impractical? So, I mean, I tried to have something that was discreet, no cost, and see what happens. And again, that was 2003, 2014. So I'm sorry, 2004, 2003. So it hasn't quite been 20 years since my dream of
One Way Sunday.
women with their families with the triple wide strollers can walk down Jerusalem Road on a Sunday morning, or kids with bikes could safely go and own part of the road.
Yeah.
I still think it's possible for that. But
I've heard both you and Amy say unanimous is not possible. I understand that as a community, unanimous is not possible. But when it comes to leadership boards like the planning board and the select board, I think this is where I disagree, where unanimous means something. And it means something to the community in terms of leadership and vision. And so when there isn't unanimous support for a vision
sure,
from two leadership boards, then it fractures from there. And it just sort of,
I understand
dissolves.
your thoughts, and I just think this isn't the time. We're in a isolated, fragmented world on steroids right now, and I'm not sure that's a reasonable expectation for right now. But I agree. I think leadership needs to understand a concept or a problem and how to deal with it and be on board. Tom will remember that he and I were on the first affordable housing committee that got turned into Affordable Housing Trust. And I think, Tom, you wrote all the language for the trust. What happened? I think we were looking for like $30,000 to fund the trust, like to have a bank account, and the selectmen just didn't support it. They were like, "Don't trust you." Anyway, so the whole committee, all 8 of us that were on the trust that had worked on this thing for years, we all resigned. We're like you're saying, we didn't get the support of the selectmen. And this is back in 2009, 2010. The selectmen aren't supporting this.
Yeah, no,
We got Avalon, so they're not worried. Okay, so forget it. I don't want to waste my time anymore. I'm not saying that this is that your issue is different than affordable housing. Affordable housing is a subset of, in a way, of the master plan and the master plan implementation committee charges.
Yeah.
But
Clark,
yeah.
Yeah,
Tom?
you also, I want to try to keep us to a certain amount of time, but.
Did I go over my allotment?
No, you didn't have an allotted time. I'm actually enjoying the fact that we have the time for a freewheeling discussion, but,
Well,
I-
we've been going one at a time instead of actually discussing.
no, I know. I don't know if,
It works for me.
Yeah, all right. Let me, if I can, I see Tim's, Amy, before I get to you and before I make my own comments, because I'm gonna, I'm gonna be like you, Clark. I got a lot to say, but Lauren, can you promote Tim? I see he has his hand up. Let him offer some thoughts if he has. Tim Davis from the Harbor Committee is here, so. And he's on the Elm Street Working Group too, isn't he not?
Yes.
Okay. Can we get him in, Lauren? I don't know.
Hi, sorry, I stepped away just for a minute. I
Oh,
will step
sorry,
in now.
no.
That's okay.
Oh.
Thought I was safe for a moment.
Never.
No, we'll give Tim his 5 minutes of, actually, Tim, 2 minutes of fame. So,
Let him go as long as you want. We don't have that
yeah,
much.
no,
else to do.
go ahead. Tim, you have some thoughts to offer here at this point? You're muted. Did he disappear?
You might have walked away.
What is that?
All right.
Simon and Garfunkel song,
All right.
Sounds of Silence?
All right, yeah, Amy, before I.
Now, how about
Are you-
that?
We
All
can hear
right,
you now.
Tim,
Am I
Tim.
okay now?
Yeah,
you sound
Simon-
good.
Can you see mine? It's light. That's the
Yes,
real
you
question.
can. Yes,
Oh,
You
you
sound
good.
good. Your boat must be in the water.
And yeah, well, it was when a picture was taken and the sun was rising too, and it still is. The sun is rising over Cohasset. Just keep that in mind. Anyway, I joined the Elm Street working group and frankly, the Master Plan Implementation Committee, primarily because of two things. One is it supported largely the efforts of the Harbor Committee that I've worked on for a number of years. But secondly, because Katie was heading that up, and my experience in working with Katie, she's been on the PEB committee with me for a number of years, has been absolutely terrific. So Katie, thank you for your service. And as you know, I support you for whatever the next activity might be, but please stay connected and please continue on PEB. And I will, whenever possible, bring you into consultation on both Elm Street and the Harbor. So I echo a couple of things that have been said tonight about our community. First of all, I think it's very important in a democracy, as muddled as it may be, that each elected official brings the thoughts, concerns, and issues of their constituency, wherever that may be. However, just importantly, to prevent the dysfunction that we've had in many other democracies in this country and elsewhere, is that once a decision is made and the majority votes for it, support it. Support it. You can support it by saying, I support it because I believe in this community. I believe in what we're doing as a committee. I may have objection to some of it, but I support it. And that's all I would ask. That, and to deal with all of the volunteers in this community and the employees of the community with respect and kindness, because they are, whether they're being paid for it or whether they're doing it just because they believe in the community, they're doing it on their own time. So they deserve all of our respect and kindness when we're dealing with each other. With that, I will go into the setting sun. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Amy, was there something you wanted to add before I get into my spiel? Amy,
No,
you all set?
no, I have nothing to say. Thank you.
Okay. No holds barred tonight, so we need to have a frank discussion. So, all right. So my thoughts on this. First, I was devastated to see Katie and Woody then resign. Two amazing resources, and Katie is the glue that's kept everything together. And she will be impossible to replace in that regard. And I thank you for your efforts. And Woody's, Woody is still the chairman of the zoning board, and certainly is a resource, but his knowledge about the zoning bylaw and the history of the bylaw is without comparison. I've been in this town now for 38 years, no, 37, and involved in town government in and out since 1989. And my observations is, number one, that this town loves to study things to death. And I think that might be happening now, that we want to keep study, and we have a hard time then going from study to actually implementing something. But I'm sure that's true of any community and in any organization. But I also know at the same time, over the course of that time, that we have made some major changes. We've added things to the bylaws. We've added new committees. We've taken on new initiatives like affordable housing. Clark's correct. We were both the master plan of 2004 and the effort to do affordable housing in the mid 2000s was slammed down very hard. But from the community outreach that led to the 2004 plan and the 2018 plan, both express widespread support for these efforts. So obviously the devil is in the details, but we do need to exhibit leadership in saying this is the direction we want to go. This is what we want to present to you. And on many of these issues, we have our legislature, our town meeting to ultimately make the final decision. I do think, my observations of Elm Street from the outside, again, I repeat that I think it's very important to this board because of the decision we issued with respect to the hotel project. But, I see a tyranny of the minority, voices coming out at the last minute, oh, the town should never change, the town should never change. That kind of sentiment killed prettying up the village 22 years ago, 25 years ago, when we were getting money from the MBTA. And the money was frittered away in study after study after study, and redesign, instead of just making a decision. And I was on the select board, and we didn't exhibit the leadership to make those decisions. And it's important, though, today we not repeat those mistakes. And there comes a time where you have to say, thank you for your input, but we are thinking of the wider community here, and we need to go forward in a certain direction for the benefit of the entire community. I echoes Katie's sentiments that we can't let this go on individual decisions. And going forward, one of my goals as chair is to bring this board back to some degree of consensus and unanimity. I know that can't always be achieved, but my thought about unanimity, I don't know that we can always get it, but I do agree with Katie that from a leadership perspective, we need to try to achieve that, and we should achieve that. But certainly what we can't do is have positions that the majority takes then be attacked and undermined. And I think that happened at town meeting in December. We put forward a simple, innocuous definition change that followed state law that we have to apply anyway, and we got pilloried. And I think there, all but one of the citizen speakers had an interest in killing what we were trying to do. And actually not the definition, they were trying to kill what they thought the definition was tied to, which is the regulation we're going to discuss at our next meeting. So, we may have opposition, but I really don't think, within the boards, we have to at least have the unanimity to go with the majority and not try to stir things up. Again, in my observation, because of individual interest rather than community interest. So, those are my thoughts. But I'm Cassie and myself are the last people standing on the working group, the zoning working group. I think we have progressed a lot further than people know or respect. Led by Katie, we have done an incredible amount of research on benchmarking in comparison to other towns, showing where our bylaw is a true outlier. We've done research on a number of topics where potential change, and I emphasize potential because nothing has been cast in stone yet, We have a written draft to at least work from. I believe from last week, we have the commitment of KP to get involved with the writing, and they have some expert resources on in their law firm to help us. And when we stopped meeting in April, we haven't met since April, I think. We were at the verge to start looking at text. We've settled on a number of directions. And so I want to keep the momentum. I know the summer is a traditional slower time, and I want to keep the momentum. And I have talked to a number of people, about restructuring the master plan process, the implementation process. I want to just briefly discuss that with the board tonight to hopefully get a consensus. I am intending to put together a memo just under my signature for me individually, but an amalgamation of thoughts I've gathered from a number of people to get before the select board before their goals and objectives meeting. Now, I've been told by various select board members that they think zoning is going to be, is again going to be their highest priority, et cetera, et cetera. So we will see about that. But the working group, just because of the intensity of the work and the focus that's needed, we were meeting twice a month for most of the last 2 years, needs to remain as a separate group, an existing committee. And again, with KP on board, the writing part can start now. The reorganization has been, a consensus has developed, and the actual writing and suggesting changes can be done. The suggestion has been to try to break it up in chewable pieces. It can be done. It's difficult because the bylaw is so interrelated. If you change one thing, you might have to change 5 other things. But that process is going to go forward, and we have to repopulate that board. And I have some thoughts when we get to our liaison discussion. We'll talk about that a little more. There's been thought about, Katie's brought out, well, of the 10 priorities in year 1, year 2, which ones remain to be the big priorities? There's a thought, again, not mine alone. Let's not redo efforts. We have standing committees, harbor, affordable housing. Let them do their thing. We don't need a working group for things that already have a standing committee. There needs to be communication and cooperation, and if there's bylaw changes that have to come from it, there should be, the master plan implementation committee should still exist as the quarterback that's keeping the glue together, gluing everything together. There's the thought, though, that maybe some of the other working groups, economic development, Elm Street, whatever other ones there are, consolidated back into the implementation committee. And the implementation committee lately, because of the creation of the working groups, isn't doing a lot of substance itself, but let it deal with some of these other issues that perhaps don't need a separate standing committee any longer.
What the master plan implementation was focusing on was sidewalks, because that doesn't have a home in terms of a committee. So that was the effort that was put forward in the last 6 months.
Right. And a thing like regional sewer, with all due respect, your comments about how things have slowed down and there doesn't seem to be a lot of engagement by Cohasset with the other 2 neighboring towns. I think, the sewer commission and the select board that's their thing. They gotta make that a priority. I think from the master plan and the planning board perspective, we can nudge them and say, hey, this is something in the master plan that was a priority. But, unless they have the political will to move forward on it, I don't know that we should spend a lot of bandwidth on it. When we discuss our liaison things in a little bit, we are going to discuss, there's issues of workloads. We're asking a lot of people to serve on 2, 3 committees. When I first got on the planning board 2 years ago, I was on 4. Getting written in with 46 votes, I all of a sudden found myself on 4 committees. And it is a big workload. So I think we do need to prioritize, whether the planning board can say from 1 to 10, what are the priorities? Again, zoning is first, and it may be a big thing, but the town needs to do this. We haven't touched it comprehensively in 36 years, and we need to do it, and we're well into the process. And it would be foolish and disheartening and you might see more resignations if we would have abandoned it at this point. Elm Street, you know, a lot of it, I guess, will ultimately be funding dependent. So I don't know how that fits into the priority, but I do think that the plan and the vision needs to be settled on. And I think, again, the minority voices, the loud voices in the room, you know, thank you, but there's a point where you are the minority voice and when we move forward. Sidewalks, you know, okay, if the master plan committee can handle that, I think that's also we know that those are very funding dependent. I believe there's a thought out there that we don't have any priority or a list of places for sidewalks. I have to believe our highway department or the DPW has that. I think they've had it for years. They've had a list of priorities for what sidewalks should get built first and what streets should get paved next with the limited funds that we have from year to year to do those things. We can't do it all at once, but you know, so for tonight, you know, and I'd like to be able to report to the select board on their meeting on Monday that this board unequivocally and unanimously supports the concept of the master plan, implementation committee still being the quarterback of the process. Let's get this board repopulated as needed. And I'm not so sure between the 1 to 10 again that we need to prioritize tonight. I think that's something select board's input is needed as well. But I'd like to be able to report that this board unanimously supports the process and going forward with it. So, you know, that's the one thing I wanted to put to a vote here, is to do that so that I could be able to report that to the select board. As far as details on my own thoughts about how the master plan, various working groups and the committee itself should move forward, you'll all see that by Friday. I'm not asking you to necessarily sign on to it individually. These are my own thoughts I'm putting forward, but I have discussed this with a lot of people and trying to not see this whole process fall apart. We've lost 2 very key people, at least on the working group, and 1 key person for the whole shooting match. And we need to see the momentum continue. So I'll, you know, I don't know, we have to do a formal roll call vote, but does everybody on this committee, this board, support the master plan and the process that we have started in implementing it?
I support the master plan and the process that's in place.
All right. I'll remember that when the next zoning article comes.
Well, individual zoning articles are a different matter.
Well, you know what, again, you know, it's, our board is going to have a formal vetting process when the bylaw changes come forward, as it always does in the state law. My point about what happened in December.
Instead of grinding up old stuff, why don't you stick to the subject matter of the master plan support?
Well,
and the implementation committee support, instead of coming after me. I'm tired of people coming after me, making it personal. That I didn't agree with something that was a zoning article. I'm tired of it.
I hear your point, and I'm not trying to make a fight about it, but I think Katie's letter alluded to it, and I agree with it, that, you know, it was not only our vote on the Elm Street and not being able to send a support letter, but it was what happened at town meeting that shows that the planning board was fractured. So I just want us to be conscious of it. You have your right to have your voice at town meeting, but we also have to remember that we're all part of a board and an institution, and we need to support that board's majority viewpoint, whether we personally agree with it or not. That's just my view of how you operate on a board. But
I disagree with the concept.
That's all right. That's fine. Clark has made his, you know, has expressed his support for the master plan process. Is everybody else on board with continuing forward?
Yes.
Perhaps in a retooled fashion of reorganization of the working groups, but I want to know that this board is supportive of the whole process.
Absolutely.
May I ask for you to clarify what you're saying, Tom, and put it into a motion? so that it's clear because we have asked-
I'll move
Wait,
that
wait,
that the planning board on June 1st, 2022 is hereby reaffirming its support for the implementation of the master plan and moving forward on its priorities as previously stated.
I second the motion.
All in favor, any discussion, any further discussion?
Aye.
Any further discussion? All right,
Tom, is there a date? Is there a date on this document, on this? that
well, I'm
we
saying that as of tonight, we are.
No, I understand. I understand. Is there
Lauren
a
has a
date
comment.
in regard to the master implementation plan? Is there a date on that? And we're saying we support that plan as of that date as a committee. And I'm just,
I think
Yeah,
it's
all right,
this,
no, I hear
this
you, I hear
date,
you.
as of today,
We're
Oh.
supporting the 2018, isn't that what it's?
2019.
2019.
2019
Master.
master plan,
Tom, can you take your hand down so we can?
and we are supporting, like that witness on the Amber Heard trial.
Abe Lincoln.
We are supporting the 2019 master plan and its objectives, and we are supporting the continuation of the current structure of an implementation committee to see that its goals and objectives move forward and are in fact implemented. That's what I'm asking you. And we are reaffirming that as of tonight, June 1.
I second that.
Aye.
All right,
Wait a minute,
Lauren,
wait a
Lauren,
minute,
was there some-
wait. That's a second motion?
No,
It's the
just,
same motion. He just restated it.
I'm just restating it, Clark.
I was requesting clarification on the motion so that we were all on the same page as to what we were going to vote on.
Right.
That's what I asked for with regard to a date. I know what date today is, and I know we're voting today. I want clarification on what we're voting on today with regard to what we're supporting. And I'm looking for a date on that. And someone said it's the 2019 implementation committee.
No, that was the master plan was
The
2019.
master plan is 2019. The implementation committee, as Katie said, was first created in early 2020. I don't think dates are critical other than the fact that we're supporting the process that began in 2020 with implementation and want to see that process continue going forward.
But Katie distributed the goals, a goal summary.
So
Last
yes,
week.
there were two formal implementation plan updates given to the planning board and to the select board. There was one done in July of 2020, and there was a second one done in July of 2021. I believe I actually presented that plan to the planning board on August 4th, 2021. That included the year 1 and year 2 implementation goals. So there's the June 2019 master plan, and then there's the subsequent implementation plans from July of 2020 and July
August
of 2021.
And again, the select board has a role in this. How the actual moving forward in light of these resignations is not decided, but I just, at this point, so fresh upon that, it's just for the planning board to reaffirm its support for the process. Lauren, was there something you wanted to add before we voted on that?
I was just going to give you the date you adopted it, which is June 24th, 2019.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that motion as understood and seconded, Clark,
Aye.
Tom Callahan, aye, Amy,
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin,
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
All right. All right, well, I think then that concludes this portion of our agenda. Katie, thank you for being here. Thank you for speaking frankly with us, and don't be a stranger.
You guys most of you have my cell phone number. All of you have my email. I've got a laptop full of years of work, so I'm happy to share as things come up. And to be honest, there almost always is a document or plan or data, even when there are skeptics out there that have said it doesn't exist. This includes sidewalks, roads. There is a plan. You just need to
Yeah.
ask the right people.
To the extent the community, anybody in the community is still listening, there has been a lot of work done by all of these subgroups, a lot of research, and most of it, some outside expertise, but mostly in-house work, especially with Katie. And it's amazing. And, so these committees are not dealing with these subjects lightly. They are researching and doing the homework necessary for, when a proposal on a particular subject goes forward. So I'll let you go, Kate. If you
Right.
can
Thank you,
wrap it up.
guys. And I hope to see everybody at the beach sometime this summer.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Katie.
Yep.
All right. Next, this will be the second one, and then we'll just have some quick stuff to deal with at the end. But the next is about our liaison assignments. Now, I've had a discussion with one of our members about this, with an alternative thought about this, and I'll, in fairness, present that as well. But in the current structure of things, there are a number of other committees in town, 6 of them at least, that by their charters, which were created here in town by the Board of the Select Board, by their charters, the planning board is to have an actual sitting member on these committees. Years ago when I was in the Select Board, we had liaisons, and they really truly were just sort of informal liaisons to different other boards. But we've set up many more formal structures as we've created a number of committees, and because of the master plan and the issue of taking on, comprehensive review of zoning, we at the moment have more committees than we've probably ever had. So there's a lot of work being spread around. And each of these boards that we have to discuss tonight has not only a planning board representative, but perhaps a select board representative, perhaps a master plan implementation committee representative. And these positions need to be filled. And in a perfect world, understanding everybody's demands of time, we have our members who are engaged and go to most of these meetings, not all of them, and then who can periodically report back to the planning board on what is going on. Most of these committees have some connection to an aspect of planning. I would say just maybe the Community Preservation Committee doesn't necessarily, but so they are important to our work. Now, the alternative thought that's been brought to my attention is to say, well, these create a lot of demands for us to each serve on a second and perhaps third committee in addition to our work here on the planning board. And perhaps these charters ought to be reorganized where have to have a sitting planning board member on the board, and that instead these other committees who have planning related subject matters report back periodically to the planning board on what they're up to. I'm going to let the proponent of that defend that in a minute. My own view is, personally, I'm a geek to this stuff, so I've always made the time, even back in the day when I had children. But today, admittedly, I don't have children in the house. I have a lot of free time to be able to attend these things, and I think they're important. And certainly, I'm heavily invested in the working group, the zoning working group. So. I expect that to continue, but I understand the demands on times of everybody else. Lauren was nice enough to circulate what the board's meeting schedules are. A lot of them, including the zoning working group, are meeting in the daytime. I hate that because it interferes in my work day, but I'd like to see a switch. But the difficulty is when we get to night meetings, there's all kinds of conflicts. Zoning meets on Tuesdays. We meet on Wednesdays. School committees on Wednesdays. Selectmen Tuesdays. Concom Thursdays. And it's tough to find a night where everybody can meet. And we traditionally stay away from Friday night or a weekend. So I realize it's tough, but so my objective here tonight was to fill these positions. But I'm going to turn the floor over to Amy for a moment to propound the alternative viewpoint.
So I've been on the planning board for 5 years. And at each of the advisory committees that I was a member of, I did not find that they were effective. And even though I had expertise in certain areas, what I was doing was observing. I was not actually contributing. My view is that we should have a once a month report, either written or by a very short presentation by the chair of the committee to us when it is necessary for us to be informed of actions that they're taking. We are advisors, but we are silent advisors. And even when we had an advisor to the planning board, it eventually became the case from the advisory committee. When it became superfluous, the person stopped coming, and I fully understood why. So I believe that we as a elected board, which has to meet at least 2 times a month and sometimes more, and we make legislative decisions that have consequences for everyone, whereas the other committees are certainly very important, but they do not have the same stricture of having to have at least 2 meetings and having to have so many people present to be able to operate. So I would recommend that we request that there be a presentation made to us on the basis of when it is sensible for us to hear from those committees, and relieve ourselves of having to attend another meeting, because we have to sometimes attend to the select board because issues that we've created end up in front of the select board. So in order to maximize the use of our time, but more importantly, to keep our focus on planning issues, fundamental planning issues that are predominantly about land use.
You're breaking up, Amy. All right, you seem,
Predominantly about zoning.
all right, you were
Amy,
breaking
you
up.
got part of that.
You were breaking up
I
and
would
you're,
request that we,
I think we understand the concept, though.
yeah, my idea is that we request periodic communications between ourselves and the other boards, rather than us being present at a meeting. I have not found those meetings or my presence at them a good use of time or consequence.
I'll just say, I'll play the devil's advocate to defend the existing structure. I mean, as far as the individual who's the representative of our board, I think it's up to them whether to participate or not. And I think, I started to get dragged back into town government in 2017 with the Open Space Committee, and then I became this board's liaison. I was still the vice chair of that committee when I was this board's representative, and I actively participated. Now, that may be me. Again, I think it goes from board to board, but I would think for, particularly on these working groups, I would separate zoning because that's just got to stay as a separate thing at the moment. But like on Elm Street or one of the other working groups, I would think a planning board member's voice would be very active in those kinds of committees.
But you're mixing the boards. I'm talking the ones that were tied directly to the master plan. Those were actions out of us. They were critical to our job. But the others are advisory for other reasons, and we don't legislate around them. What we need to do is to focus on the ones where we have to vote to say go or no go.
Anybody? All right, let's see. In the alphabetical discussion thing, Kevin is up first. Any thoughts on this? I mean, appreciating that you're new to all of this. But.
Yes. I'll just put it out there. What everyone is going to know is the obvious, is everyone's constrained for time. Existing board members, people considering joining boards, people that want to join boards but are hesitant to do so given concerns about their ability to do so 100%. I think we got to be realistic with this. You know, even attending town meeting, you know, that we know the percentages of people that do that is very low. And then at the last town meeting, it was, you know, approved that we would find a way to make adaptions despite hundreds of years of New England town meeting history to find a way to do so remotely. I think we need to look at alternatives to an existing structure if it can allow us to be better at what we need to do versus what we perhaps also like to do. And I am new. I'd like to be a contributing member to this board. I will say I'm one of the ones out there that's going to be constrained for time to actively participate at other levels of governance in town. So I'm supportive of what Amy is saying and has voiced here.
Deirdre?
I understand what Amy's saying, and in my past experience on many boards, including directing our public policy committee for a statewide child welfare agency, I can tell you that having to have people on various boards, whether it's the development board, having members on our board of directors, our statewide EI committees, I needed to hear what was going on statewide. I can tell you I had board members, very, very, very powerful, influential people in the corporate world, nonprofit world in Boston. They didn't have time to be at all these meetings, but I needed to know what was going on. So a written document, whether it was the minutes or it was a detailed report that applied to our board, was presented back to me as chairman to deal with those issues. And it was done in a timely fashion, usually at least a week or so before my next meeting. It worked out very well. However, I do understand there are some committees like zoning board that we probably do need someone at, whether it's obviously the working committee is something that we need to be actively involved with. Again, time is of an essence for all of us at this point. I echo Kevin's comments. I am truly committed to being here because I put myself forward to do so. However, I teach in our school system. I am there 5 days a week with the youngest population that we have in Cohasset, our integrated preschool. I am there running from 8 a.m. until 3:30 in the afternoon. And I do know personally, I have very limited time as well as other personal commitments with my family that I cannot, there's not a lot that's going to be. So I'm just looking for some alternatives to address the need, which is critical, that we are informed about what else is going on in these committees.
It's critical for us. You know, I think for our board and the select board, probably uniquely, it's critical that we have a sense of what everybody else is up to. You know, for our board, because we're doing overall planning, but we're like the stewards of the zoning bylaw, and you know, as long as there's some system, I'm going to ask Lauren in a minute, but Clark, your thoughts on this?
Yeah,
You come from the old school like me, where we had an active liaison structures.
well, there was a time before I had a family where, you know, I mean, 3 or 4 meetings a week wasn't unheard of.
Right.
And, you know, working on my private practice projects way into the night and waking up early, and it didn't really matter, but I'm crushed at this point with a family life and professional life, and trying to be an advocate for change and improvement in my community. So I mean, I'm not exactly sure we can hang back and avoid the waste of time for some of these committees that it may appear. But I'm open to a hybrid approach that seems to be kind of like the consensus of the board, where we in some committees, they need the collaboration and the input of a planning board member. It really can't be avoided. I'd say on the Elm Street corridor, you know, very often I'd make reminders of what had been discussed, but frankly, my contribution is 10%, and Lauren, as the town planner, was more like 90% on planning issues. So I didn't need to be there, but I was there for most of the meetings anyway. I think that there's got to be a method, and in particular how our planning board meetings are run. If they're run efficiently and everyone's time is respected, I think that that's going to be very critical moving forward to these committee assignments, and that they basically hit the main issues up front in the first half hour, and that people who need to drop off can drop off. I guess I'm recommending a hybrid approach, because we don't need to waste our time, but there are things that, what I had said about everyone existing in silos. I mean, that being on these committee assignments helps to knit the fabric of our community together.
Yeah.
And in particular, when our planning board needs to know what's going on with these other groups and other tasks. If we have somebody who can report quickly on a regular basis on what's been going on, or not necessarily on a regular basis, but when it's necessary for something to be known by the planning board and discuss, that we know about it. We're not just out of the loop.
Okay. Lauren,
So
I wanted to ask.
did that make sense? That was like a hybrid approach, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the right word, but I'm getting,
I
I'm
mean,
putting
I don't know
together
how it works, because
Yeah,
the
no,
committees
I-
have charters, and the charters, you can't go
I'll-
change the charter.
I'll have a suggestion in a minute, but Lauren, from the staff perspective, and again, there is an effort being made, discussions that have been had about the staffing in the planning department because of the proliferation of all these committees and a very active master plan and an implementation process. So, not trying to add to your workload, Lauren, but is there a way maybe staff would be the coordinating point of reporting back and forth, or you're not attending all these other committee meetings either? So I don't know if.
Yeah, so I like the idea of a hybrid approach, because I can tell you, for example, the first thing that comes to my mind is that Affordable Housing Steering Committee is one of the groups that you have a liaison to. I staff that committee. I am integrally involved in what they do. And most often the past couple of years that I've been here, I have been giving the planning board update to them. So like reciprocal back and forth. That's an easy committee that it's like, yes, you can have me be that or function back and forth. I think there are also some committees though, like master plan, particularly also the zoning bylaw working group. It's going to be integral that there's a planning board involvement there. I think Amy Glassberry makes an excellent point though, where there are also some committees that maybe your presence is not necessary as a reoccurring basis. And, whether it's that committee comes and visits you and gives you an update quarterly when there's something going on. I think there's a hybrid approach here, like Clark said, but I do also echo the concern that a lot of these things are just written into committee charges that would need to be taken up with select board. The most important concern I have in terms of like committee charge that actually is going to have to be decision making is also CPC, because of the way that they operate and moving into town meeting votes. It's not like Affordable Housing Steering Committee, Master Plan Implementation Committee. They're not really voting on anything that's, more policy and suggestions and recommendations, whereas some committees have to perform functions, and CPC is one that needs to actually vote on projects that come before them for town meeting vote.
But it's also, as I said, it's also the one that's probably the least related to planning issues. It's more expenditures on lots of different things in town. But let me suggest this, that I go to the select board with the idea that the charters of CPC, Affordable Housing Committee, and the Open Space Committee be redone, that there not need to be a planning board sitting member any further. But in exchange for that, these boards are to report to us periodically and also be free to ask the planning board to send a representative for a particular issue at a particular meeting. See if that works. And if it, and the select board can take this up in their time. In the meantime, it's clear that, for the moment, we just won't appoint anybody to these posts for those 3 committees at this time. The Master Plan Implementation Committee, I agree with Lauren. I think we should still have representation, and as far as Elm Street, to the extent Elm Street might be consolidated back into the Master Plan Committee, we don't have to deal with separate appointments at this time. The Zoning Bylaw Working Group right now is just me and Cassie, and the Select Board's representative, Jack. That officially has a zoning board member. Woody has resigned. Whether they're going to replace him, I don't know yet. The Open Space Committee has an official seat on that committee. Peter Pescatori has resigned. So I'm personally not of the view they need somebody on the Zoning Bylaw Working Group. The Select Board has a seat. Katie and Cassie were both Master Plan Implementation Committee and citizen seats, but we don't really have an official citizen-only seat. And then our board has a second seat because we are the primary authors of zoning bylaws. So, the select board has to make a decision if Jack, now that he's chair, is he's going to continue or they're going to replace him with someone else. I would like to suggest to the select board going forward that, especially for getting the community as a whole involved, another thing that was evident as an issue, communication about the zoning bylaws, critical, is bringing more citizen members onto the working group. But then our second member, do we have a second member or do we not? Do we yield our second seat for a citizen member in order, to help towards the goal of community buy-in to what the working group is, the zoning working group is doing?
Excuse me, Tom, what is Cassie's role?
Cassie, what has she been doing?
Yeah, no, what is she?
Cassie is officially, Katie clarified this for me, both Katie and Cassie are on that committee, on the zoning working group, as representatives of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. But on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, they are citizen representatives. So they're ultimately citizen representatives. Cassie has, I haven't reached out to her since these resignations, and I must, because she's been a dynamo on research stuff for us.
So why don't we?
So I want to try to keep Cassie, but the question for us, for our board, I can make all kinds of suggestions to the select board. They're the ones that have to change the charge. And zoning has to make its decision if it's going to replace Woody. Open space has to decide if they want to continue to have a seat at the table. I don't think that's as critical. Right now for us, do we continue with a second member? Do we instead yield that to a citizen member?
Yeah, I think
And
we want to have 2 members of the planning
All right.
board on the zoning bylaw working
Fine.
group. And
Well,
it's
Paul
because
Collier-
it's highly technical and we are the #1 advocates for zoning changes.
All right, so Paul Collier was our second member and he's no longer with us. So that position is open. Now, that committee, we've been working very intensely for, since, the third quarter of 2020, we have been going pretty much twice a month up until April. We've hit a wall at the moment. Lots of research, a lot of material to read because of the research and because of the bylaw drafts that have been done. So I can say that there are some members of the working group who read and get into the weeds more than others. I personally think it involves that commitment to jump in, read all
Tom,
the
I'm
material.
happy to volunteer for the
All
zoning
right, well-
working group. If you're taking me off the Elm Street corridor and wrapping that into master plan implementation.
All right.
That's fine with me. You know, I work
Right.
with zoning bylaws for a living.
Yeah, no,
And I've
I,
read a lot more case law than I really wouldn't brag about.
no, I, and I, to the extent the last man standing, I might quarterback this committee for a bit. I want to get it off daytime meetings, but again, finding a night that everybody can meet. Again, if we take board reps off and we have citizen members, it becomes easier, so we don't conflict with other board meetings. But we are going to get into a pretty intense thing. We were on the verge of starting actual, we pretty much reached consensus on the format of the reorganization, the housekeeping part, but we were starting to get into actual text. That was going to be our next step.
So Tom, can you
So
please
I,
explain?
you know,
what-
is anybody else interested, I guess, with
I want-
that background? But
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When will KP come on? And because it seems to me that the where you are at this point, KP should be taking over and
It's-
providing insights. But yeah, I mean, it's not clear at all how this committee is going to be functioning.
hey, look, first of all, I have written a draft, okay, because the discussion point's got to start from somewhere. And I'm tired of the implication that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. KP is going to,
Who said that? Nobody said that.
well,
Not on this board.
well, I never, all right, strike that. The sole step with KP, and was one of the things to bring to the board, the select board, is they just got to unleash the purse strings, and apparently there is money set aside for this purpose. I have spoken with Carolyn about it. They're on board to help us. And there will be a second set of legal eyes and expertise on doing this. All right, it's not a question of them taking over. This is a process that I firmly believe has to be done by the citizens of this community. And that's why I argued at the working group against going too far afield with a consultant, because, and what did we get? We got somebody who was a zoning expert from Minnesota. Well, a zoning expert from Minnesota isn't going to help us.
Tom,
Right.
we didn't get anyone. They were just the only people that applied.
Anyway,
Lauren would like to say something.
Amy, let me conduct the meeting and make my statements, all right? KP is on board as of now, okay? In answer to your question, Lauren, please.
Just wanted to add some more detail to that. I spoke with Carolyn Murray today, and she plans to have a scope of work for a zoning rewrite to me by within the week. So I imagine this will be happening imminently, that we'll be continuing this conversation.
All right. All right, is anybody else interested in the second planning board position?
It sounds like a lot of fun, guys, but no here.
All right, I said this to someone else the other day. My only concern for new members coming onto this committee at the time is let's not try to reinvent the wheel. We are very far along in a process and a consensus on directions. At least as to the reorganization and the housekeeping part, I can assure everybody here, and I can assure the community, that on matters of true substance, where possible change could come, we haven't even gotten into deep discussion, just much less made decisions. But I want to make sure, Clark, you're invested in this process going forward and being constructive with it, and not trying to reinvent the wheel or blow it up. I have to personally express my concern about that. But I also know your experience in this, and I've worked with you since
Well, Tom, I mean, I understand
1999 on
that
this
the
stuff,
conflicts
so-
from fall town meeting were regrettable. And I think it had to do with being in silos and not communicating well. But if I'm on the committee, I'm going to say what I think and how I think zoning changes would play themselves out as in a scenario thing, so that the changes get us what we want. Because we always have to deal with unintended consequences with these kinds of things, and
That's fair enough, and so we'll submit your name forward for appointment to that. Amy, do you have your hand up for a reason?
Yeah, I just wondered, Tom, you are staying on that committee, is that correct?
Absolutely. I am too invested in the time and
Okay.
energy and the.
I just wanted to make
and-
sure that there were going to be 2 members of the planning board who are going to be on that, and that seems sufficient.
All right, and are you going to,
well,
are
you're
you
there
going, are you
before. I
going
mean,
to
you-
stay, are you going to stay as the liaison to the master plan? Committee?
I will.
Deirdre, I saw your hand up.
I just wanted to make sure that we're all in a shared mission here for the town, Cohasset.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
possibly.
Oh, and I gotta
It
tell you,
doesn't
Oh,
We are in a shared mission here for the town of Cohasset.
yes, thank you for saying.
Thank you.
And you know, I will say, if over the 2 years, I've tried to make updates and reports to this committee about what the working group is doing. I expect to, in comments to the select board, provide a full update, because again, I don't think everybody knows all of where we've done, what consensuses we have reached up to this point. And so I do think it's time to summarize that for everybody as to where we are. But you know, again, we get to the meeting and we get to around 8:30 and everybody gets squirrely, and you know, sometimes these updates have to be listened to, and sometimes they're going to be quick and sometimes they're not. So let's just all remember that and try to focus on them when we have to. All right, well, so we have a direction with that. Next, Lauren, if you could just quickly update us on the process that's been arrived at for putting on new members on this board.
Yes, absolutely. So the process to appoint an unfulfilled term, partially governed by state law, what you do is it's a joint appointment from the select board and the planning board for 1 year until the following annual town election. So because Paul Grady fulfilled 3 years of a 5-year term, we have 2 years that are up. 1 year will be fulfilled by appointment. And then the following annual town election of 2023, there will be an open seat for 1 year for a full member seat. And then, so what we will do in the process for now, I have recorded with our communications director, just a quick, video explaining sort of like, this is what the planning board does. These are the days we meet, and we're accepting letters of interest, statements of, people who may want to fill that 1 year appointment. We'll take that through the end of the day on Monday, June 13th, and then we're looking to schedule a joint meeting with the select and planning board to make that appointment. And then if there's multiple candidates, that's an opportunity for you to interview and make a selection. So we're just looking to narrow a date. I will be reaching out tomorrow actually to circle to reference across the boards, but June 29th is what we're penciling in as a tentative date to hold that joint session, and that would be the only topic on the agenda.
Yeah. And so I just, my thoughts on the process that I've given to Lauren is just that, if we have a situation where Kevin, and the decision is completely up to you, that you would like to move up to Paul's seat, that we also use this process to get an associate in Kevin's place at the same time. So people who are applying should express interest, whether they're interested in either position or just one or the other.
do we get a former member of the planning board like Al Moore, who knows what stuff's going on?
If he wants to, we have, I
Are you
passed
in the
along,
club with him?
I
You see him at the
passed,
club?
yeah, I passed along one other person's interest to Lauren. I'll say it here, if Kevin's taken the initiative to go out and get elected, and so, Kevin wants the Paul seat, he will have my vote of support for that. But, for an associate member who comes in as a new associate member, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, it'll be the same thing, a 1 year term instead of
That's
3.
right.
Correct. So for example, Kevin right now has been elected for a 3-year associate member term. If he were to choose to run for that appointment, it would be a 1 year appointment. He'd have to run then for election, and whoever was appointed to fill the associate member seat would again be 1 year, and you'd have that go back to election at 2023.
my point is just by the end of June to get either or both of those things filled so that we start the summer with a fully staffed board, given the things we have coming ahead. The last thing on organization, do we have any minutes to approve tonight?
No, not tonight.
I saw you had in the agenda, planning director update. Do you have any updates for us besides what we've talked about?
No, I don't have anything new for you tonight. I may at our next meeting. It's been a busy month, so busy
Yeah.
couple of weeks.
So I just wanted at the end just to reaffirm some things that I brought up at the last meeting. So we are going to continue. The consensus is to keep it 6:30, but when we get back to live, we'll revisit that. We're going to continue the process of everything being scheduled at 6:30, and we deal with them in a particular order that Lauren sets when she sets the agenda. My only personal thing is get the easy stuff out of the way first and put the longer discussions at the end. I brought up the idea, haven't discussed it with John Hallen yet, but it was actually, the concern was brought to me by one of our members about having John report to us, perhaps monthly, perhaps quarterly, writing or in person, his call on any issues with permits that have already been issued and with issues about compliance, timing, are they underway? Are they in compliance? Are they missing something? Does anybody like that idea? Not like that idea?
Absolutely.
But not monthly. I mean, quarterly, maybe.
Do you think quarterly is sufficient, Laura? I suppose so. I mean, obviously, if John finds a true enforcement issue, he'll come to us right away. But he is the chief zoning enforcement officer, so I just thought there should be some regular contact. I've also suggested that Lauren's staff reports that she gave us at the last meeting that doesn't do all the time, that kind of become a regular thing because she's our professional, she's our peer review as much as when we hire an outside peer review. When we do have outside peer review, Lauren's opinion maybe I agree with them, but I want Lauren to give us her professional spin and not just summarize what the application is before us, although that helps, but also to give us her spin, because that's part of your job of being a professional planner. So I hope we do that. And then I had mentioned about having a public comment. I don't know, do we need it? Do we not need it? Have it on our agenda. You see what tonight and last week were fairly typical. We get a lot of people if they're interested in a particular subject, and other nights we'll get nothing. So I don't know if you want to have that on the agenda as a regular item. And if so, do we put it at the beginning? Do we put it at the end? I would suggest probably the end, but I don't know what the board's thoughts are about having that. No, other board, the select board does it, and back in the day, Concom used to do it. So I don't know. I'll go with the consensus on your thoughts about having a regular public comment period.
I don't think it hurts to leave it in because we almost never get public comments.
Yeah. Ironically,
But
we
it
had one
leaves the
tonight.
door open just in case somebody's got something like, oh my God, planning emergency. I want the planning board to come to the next meeting of whatever it is.
Okay. All right.
They're going to pave over a pond and
No,
it's wrong.
It's ironic. It's ironic we had one tonight for the first time. I mistakenly thought he was part of the the Elm Street Corridor group, and he wasn't. But so,
Leave the door open. It rarely gets.
Insert that at the agenda
rarely-
after the hearings. At the end, right after our hearings, but before we deal with our usual administrative business. So,
Yeah, as long as if there's nothing, we don't waste a lot of time on it.
right.
I mean, 5 seconds, you should be able to find out. Is
No,
everything
but there may be,
2, 3, 4, 5, and then move on.
I mean, again, I don't, nobody's listening to us right now, but like, for example, today I had to respond to a bunch of questions on 143 about the Pleasant Street site, because I guess a chain link fence has gone up around the site now. And that shouldn't be the forum necessarily to be answering questions about what's going on. And I wish members of the public would come directly and ask us rather than put it on 143. But, hopefully we'll encourage that. And I think as we have things going forward, we will get more public comment on stuff. Anyway, all right. I want to thank you all for your attention and being here tonight since we didn't have anything. But there are times when we have to discuss these things. It's more than just permit hearings that we often have to deal with. So I
Lucy
appreciate.
says good night to everyone, by the way.
Good night to Lucy. Next meeting is the 15th. We have one site plan review for the golf club, and then we will dive into our continued hearing on the access regulation. And so I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second,
All right, Clark,
Aye.
Tom Callahan, aye. Amy,
Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin,
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre.
Aye.
All right, thank you all again. Thank you, Lauren, for your help.
Thank you, Lauren.
Good night.
Thank you, Lauren, for being here.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.
See you in
Bye.
2
Thanks,
weeks. All right,
Take care.
bye.